love of racing really started. I was a young lad. I was a kid. I always really remembered watching the cup races as a kid with my dad on TV. They're always on Sundays at home. Um, as far as watching, being involved, really, ended up going to the local racetrack, Beach Ridge Motor Speedway. I went a couple times in middle school, and then I started jumping on a team to help right around 2003, 2004-ish. The interest really kind of just evolved from watching racing on TV with my father. Like I said, it was usually on the weekends when I was a kid. A lot of the home videos that I've rewatched back when I was a kid often had the cup race or something on in the background. So I've always kind of really wanted to be involved in the sport since I was a kid. What's cooler than being in a race car driving around around a track? But as far as kind of evolved from that, met some friends at school that were involved in racing. One raced a kart. Another one was in a racing family, a buddy of mine, Jeff. So kind of in linking up and kind of hanging out with them, I kind of naturally moved towards, let's go to the racetrack one weekend. And that kind of led one step to another to ended up ultimately being on a crew, ultimately now leading up to be owning my own car and driving myself. So it kind of, it's a journey of evolution right through from really seeing it when I was a kid on TV and working all the way through up until currently where I own my own car and drive. You want to get started, first and foremost, you got a crew. Is a good way to learn the car, learn the setup, learn the basic fundamentals of what it takes to not only afford and run a car, but what you do to the car, how it changes, and also ultimately climb that. If you want and so desire, you can jump out, buy a car, and then work on it to get it track ready, race ready, and then jump in the seat, and then climb up all the way through that.
How long were you in a pit crew?
I was on a pit crew for. See, I really started probably 2004 with an actual job. Before that, I was just kind of the kid that kind of bummed along. But as far as like having a specific job on the crew, is probably 2004. It's a flashlight holder mostly, because we raced at night. But and then it evolved to who my crew chief is now, having a car. And so I've been on as far as a crew, was probably, I was close to 15, maybe a few more years than that. From 2005 to when I first bought my car. It's 15 years. 2020 is when I bought my first car. As far as the first time I jumped behind the wheel and strapped in, fire suit, helmet on, and got out on the track. The first one was in 2019. For my crew chief now, he was driving at the time, and he drove the 24 Wildcat at Beach Ridge Motor Speedway. Oh my God, he's trusting me with this car that he's put all of this money to. It was the end of the year, so if something happened, it wouldn't affect him points-wise other than that night. But it was on his dollar. It was on his dime. It was his equipment. So at the time, I was driving a dump truck for a company out of Westbrook. And I had to calm myself down. I had to have the thought I'm trusted to drive this triaxle dump truck on the road, which in some ways is more dangerous than the racetrack, depending on who you share the roadway with. And if I'm trusted well enough to do that, I think I could probably handle the race car. And as soon as I crested the entrance into turn 3, all of those nerves, all of those everything just went done. And then I was going off of pure instinct.
What were your fears that you had to overcome that had to have been, kind of like that 15-year-old getting on the turnpike for that first time?
Yep.
Thinking about shit.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah, the fear aspect in racing is something that every driver knows the risk. when it comes to strapping in for competition, and even not even competition. Anything can happen when you're on the track, whether or not it's practice laps, you've rented the track and it's just you, or you could have parts failure and something happens, and no matter what happens, the wall comes up pretty quickly. I've been fortunate enough up until this point. I've gotten in a couple good licks, but nothing really major that's affected me personally. But the fear aspect, as far when it comes to racing, like I said, it's always it's always there. You gotta put it to the back of your mind, because if you let that end up getting in the way, it can affect your instincts and your reaction time, and you get nervous. I've had a couple close calls with spinning cars in front of me where it just that split second I was like, oh no, instead of automatically reacting to try to avoid, even if it was a wrong decision to go to the outside or to the inside to try and avoid a spinning car or a wreck, you still have that reaction, so you still have a fighting chance to avoid it. Some things can't happen because in good racing, you're racing in tight quarters. This past season was the first year where I had that ability. I was able to race with cars between having a better car, because I built a brand new car for this past year, and seat time for me. But it's a gremlin that's always there, and it can strike at any time. I've seen it strike at the racetrack to people. It's always there, and you got to be able to put that in the back, or else it's going to affect you the wrong way on the track, and the wrong way mentally, really, because if you start to be consumed by that, you miss out on doing something you absolutely love. Like I said, this has been a long time coming. I'm not going to let that affect me the wrong way. But as far as it's a different story also when it comes to having a wife and kids at home. They also have to be okay with that risk. Me and my wife have actually had a few conversations similar to this. Like, how can you do that? I do that knowing that we're home, and then one day maybe you're not going to come home from the track, because it's a very big possibility. It's usually a few drivers every year, probably more than that, because you only really hear about the real big wrecks nationally that don't make their way home from the racetrack. They don't come home with a hauler, you know what I mean? So your family also has to be okay with you putting yourself in that risk. And once that affects your support system with your family, it gets in. That's when it really you need to do some thinking. But as far as overcoming it, as long as you can, in my experience, as long as you can overcome that, however you need to overcome it. Because like with anything, there's a certain point where it's all right. Well, this is a line. This is where I'm going to go. This is as far as where I'm going to go with this. And then once you hit that line, and you lose that desire, and a lot of people lose that desire because of that fear, that's when you need to jump out of a car. Because if at that point in time you're a danger, not just to yourself but everybody.
Is your family okay with you racing?
My family is okay with me. My wife doesn't like the amount of time and money I spend on it, but we manage to swing it so we don't miss any bills. My parents are very supportive. They help me as much as they can, and the friends that I consider family support me quite a bit as well. The big one there being my wife. She supports me. Obviously, she hopes I do well. Hopes I don't bring the car home wrecked, because that means more time and more money spent in the shop. But they all support me pretty well. They understand that this is a long time dream that I've worked a lot.
Do you feel there's anybody in your family right now that's going to follow in your footsteps?
My son, who's just turned 2, is infatuated with race cars. If more so than I was, than I think I was at his age. I don't remember much when I was 2, but judging by, like I said, from seeing home videos from the old VHS camcorders
back in 88, 89 when I was a really young kid. He gets a lot more excited than I remember me seeing on those. My daughter likes the concept of racing, it seems. She has expressed interest in driving, so we will explore that when she becomes of the right age to jump behind the wheel in a kart, once I get to that point. But I think, as of right now, I think if I were to make an assumption, I think my son's going to be the driver, and I think my daughter's actually going to be a crew member, because she wants to come to the racetrack and help Dad as much as she can.
Safety equipment. What do you have for safety equipment that helps prevent, God forbid, there was a crash, but personal harm to yourself?
Mm-hmm. My safety equipment, and I wouldn't jump behind the wheel if I didn't have it. If I don't have it, is I have a full containment race seat, mounted securely with appropriate hardware, bolts, nuts, right directly to the roll cage of the car. Charged, ready to go. Fire extinguisher is required by all tracks. Race seats are typically required by all tracks. It depends on division also what level of those race seats. But typically fire extinguishers are within arm's reach of being strapped in, are required by all racetracks. 5-point race belts that are mounted appropriately depending on angle, and they tech all this stuff, and typically at the beginning of the season for safety tech. Certified helmet obviously will protect your dome, and those are all pretty well required to a certain degree in what level. Not all tracks for our division in the lower ranks require, but I have a Hans device, which is a neck restraint system, so it prevents against concussions, limits the amount that I can move my head forward and back in a case of an impact, to keep the dome. That actually attaches right directly on both sides to the back of my helmet, with tethers that go to the restraint system that goes underneath my seat belts on top of my shoulders. That's tightened down when I tighten my belts. Typically, when you build a car for roll cage all the way around the driver's area, make sure the door, this isn't so much equipment, but is as much of a good idea and how a properly built car should be, in my opinion, should be, is the door bars that will protect you in a side impact. Anything maybe protruding that will come through those door bars, it's all sealed off in the case with my car, and just make the car as, when you build the car, you make it's going to get bent. Eventually something will happen, but you build it to brake and wreck correctly, if that makes sense. Let's go and do this. This is what I love to do. This is what I'm passionate about. Let's go and do it. Let's go have fun, which is number one always. It's always to have fun. It's always to have fun. The points and everything is, as much as I say that I'd like to have a real good points night, it's like they say with fishing. A bad night fishing or a bad night at the track beats a good day at work.